Okay, Supervisor Leopold.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everyone who came out here today. Gotten to know many of you because we've been on this long journey together. You attended the meeting when it was at the Santa Cruz Civic, when 600 people showed up. You attended, many of you attended a vast majority of the meetings that were held over in Palo Alto. It made an impression upon the Select Committee because of the tenacity of people. We heard during that Select Committee process a couple of things from the FAA. One is they did not understand the impact that they were creating on Santa Cruz County. Two is they told us that once they understood what was going on, that the terrain and the geography and the concentration of people were fundamentally different than what it had been under the Big Sur path, and that some of those things could not be ameliorated. It has been suggested that with the fixing of Class B airspace that there is no difference between the Big Sur and Surfer. And I think that that shows a real disdain for the information that we received during the Select Committee process, where we got many modelings of noise impacts as part of that process. I have a whole folder in my office of all the different modeling that they had done at our request. And it's why we put in the recommendation that the new path would have an equivalent or less DNL noise exposure than it was before the change in jet path. We understood that. The DNL monitoring isn't a perfect way. We would all do it differently. This jurisdiction measures noise differently. But we were very sensitive to the fact that it should be at least as quiet as it was before, and it should hopefully be less noisy than it was before. So it's been suggested that somehow a 50-50 allotment is fair. You should know that the Select Committee did have a proposal from a member to do that, 50-50. Not only is that technically difficult, FAA would maybe say impossible, but it doesn't address the real impacts that are currently being experienced by people under the Surfer route. It's basically acknowledging that you will suffer and you will suffer permanently. So it's technically not possible, and it's not just in any way, shape, or form. So let's look at what the three recommendations are. When I said belt and suspenders, we were trying to do everything we could to make it less noisy. So they, one of these pieces was use flight altitudes at least as high and preferably higher than the historic BSR procedure along the entire route. We had a long discussion with the FAA. We also have, I have many discussions with members of the committee about trying to set an absolute number. But one thing that I've realized is that the height is not the only thing that makes the difference. It's the procedures that make a big difference. And what we were told by the FAA at the time was, don't set a number, because what if we can come up with a path that is less noisy but doesn't meet your criteria? It could create procedures and we would meet your criteria but then not be able to meet the noise impacts. So they have said that they can't make it higher than it was on the historic BSR route, but that doesn't mean it's going to be noisier than it was on the BSR route. So let's look at the number 4, which was utilizing a new BSR waypoint equivalent to Eddy and at or above 6,000 feet to ensure flights cross the Menlo waypoint at or above 5,000 feet and maintain idle power over Heman. I point that out to my to our CAO, and You would have to get to know what Eddy, Menlo, Heman are, and there's a bunch of other waypoints. Good luck with that. So the Menlo waypoint doesn't exist anymore. They changed that. And in fact, before they changed it, they actually gave a recommendation to move it up to something above 4,500 feet. So while they have questions about the feasibility of this one, the real impact about this was for the Menlo waypoint over Palo Alto. And this has no effect on Santa Cruz. It's what you do when you're trying to build a political consensus, is you try to meet all the needs. So this was an important need for members there. The last one was, will be subject to future capacity limitations, particularly during nighttime hours and when vectoring exceeds current levels. Again, this was put in at the request of people outside of Santa Cruz County because they were trying to deal with the difficult issues of nighttime flights, especially as they come in from the west, primarily through Woodside. At the time that we made this, the FAA representative, Steve May, questioned whether at the meeting where we made the motion, he questioned whether this is something that the FAA could do. This was a last-minute addition by a group that were interested in proposing this recommendation. So when I look at what's in the actual recommendation about having noise modeling that shows that the new procedure will be less noisy than it was on the BSR route in 2014, that we start from a point over the Monterey Bay and reaches the shoreline at altitude no lower than 12,500 MSL, that incorporates modifications to Class B airspace, that uses flight altitudes as high as possible while still allowing idle power flight, and is designed to avoid the use of speed brakes. For those of us who have been working on this issue for 3 years know these are the critical pieces in addressing the noise concerns that have been out there. When I read off earlier today the number of complaints in the last 6 days, I should share with my colleague that these are low numbers. That if you look historically over the last 3 years, the September, October, the numbers go down because the atmosphere, the cloud, the fog, all play some role in this noise, and it'll go up. I mean, there was, in the end of August, up to 9,000, and we've gotten as many as 11 or 12,000 points a day, or complaints a day. So I have a great appreciation for our county administrative officer or his designee. I think we have a very talented staff. I don't think they're the right ones to do this. I think that when you're advocating with other elected officials, your most powerful advocate is another elected official. And to try to just throw up our hands saying, well, we can't make a decision, so we'll just pick the CAO, is really a setup. It's a setup for people who won't get the advocacy they need, and it's a setup for the staff who then has to figure out how to balance all the things. And when you're there at the meeting and you have to make a decision, and we hasn't talked with members of the board, what are you going to do? That's a great way to have a short career at the Board of Supervisors. So, as I pointed out, I think that there are some of us who have a lot of skin in the game. Your showing up here today does point out that the people who live under this path right now are informed, desperate for change, and I have no doubt that at these roundtable meetings, we're going to see you and other people in red shirts who will be advocating for that point of view. As my chart showed, there are 2 districts of unincorporated residents that are mostly affected. mostly in my district under these. Tens of thousands of people are affected. Supervisor McPherson also has a lot of people in the unincorporated area.
Yes.
But be clear, the city of Santa Cruz gets represented, the city of Capitola gets represented, the city of Scotts Valley gets to be represented, and the city of Watsonville gets to be represented. Those incorporated communities will have to choose. It's relatively inexpensive for them to participate. I think the unincorporated residents need a strong advocate. I am prepared to be a strong advocate. I would love to have Supervisor McPherson as my backup, and I do not support this motion that would turn it over to a bureaucrat to make important decisions that affect the lives of everybody here. So I don't support the motion.
Thank you. Supervisor McPherson?